Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Big smile today because I got to kind of go back to actually reporting on football. A football match. It feels like it's been forever. Last time in this country was, ages ago because I didn't even get to go to the last game of the season because I was already heading off to Australia for that friendly in Melbourne, which was, yes, crazy in itself. But I was back today to actually reporting and covering football rather than writing about what might happen, all of this sort of stuff that this time of year normally brings you. I was covering a football match. The Spurs under-21s, their first game of the season at Enfield Town, 3-2 they won in a friendly, while at the same time trying to piece together what had been going on in the first team's behind closed doors friendly against Cambridge United, which took place at Hotspur Way. Yeah, the game I was at kicked off at 3 o'clock. That behind closed doors first team friendly kicked off at midday. And I was kind of arriving at Enfield halfway in between those two times. I got there about 1-ish, trying to work out what had happened about 2 miles up the road. But I loved it. I loved writing about things that have actually happened in football and all of that and matches. And you can tell, you know what I'm like. I'm perfectly fine operating within the world of the transfers and all this sort of malarkey, even though, as I always tell you, 99% of it is utter rubbish. But when you just report on football, it's just, that's kind of why I got into it. So I loved it, honestly. A little bit smarter looking today, although kind of only being able to see that up, it looks almost like I'm dressed like a sailor. I should be wearing like a little hat or something. It was a new experience to write about 2 matches at the same time, while trying to keep an eye on what was happening in one game like this, while also looking down, taking messages, taking phone calls at one point, trying to piece together, because the very nature of behind closed doors game is that not many people see it. So to try and piece together who played, what the score was, exactly how it played out, and various aspects to it as well. It wasn't easy, but again, love all of that. That's far more enjoyable to me than what most of my days are at the moment, which is ringing a million different agents who will, you've got to pick out then what's true, what's an agenda pushing, what's something that is just maybe good for a client or good for a club, and so many politics involved. Football's just football. That's great. Also thanks first off to Enfield Town. People there were fantastic. They were so nice. I mean, you might have heard me say previously, I used to cover non-league football way back in the day. Got to so many non-league grounds. Had never actually been to Enfield Town's Queen Elizabeth II Stadium. It's very cool. Very cool. And the people there were lovely. And also, thank you very much to the very many nice Spurs fans that came up. Met a lot of very nice people today. But let's dive straight into this first team, Postecoglou's first unofficial friendly of the summer, I guess, against League One side Cambridge United. If you're not aware, Cambridge United finished 18th last season in League One. They started their pre-season work about a week before Spurs did, so that little bit fitter, which is a good thing. That's kind of often what Premier League teams aim for, is to try and go for teams that maybe have had that little bit extra on them to not quite balance it up, but, just give a little extra to the game. Like I said, kicked off at midday. From what I understand, 2 completely different Tottenham teams, one half to the other. It was almost seen essentially by Spurs as 2 different matches. And the 2 teams, it wasn't like an A team, a B team, whatever. It was very much like a smattering of kind of stronger senior players in the first half team and a smattering of first team strong players in the second half team as well, mixed in with lots of other players, young players, some very young players that we'll talk about as well, and of course new signings in Archie Gray and Lucas Bergvall, both making their first appearances in a Tottenham shirt in any kind of match action. Timo Werner as well, technically, also a summer arrival, albeit one we've seen in the previous season. So from what I understand, and there's been some differing kind of views over the overall score, but from what I have understand, and I've heard this verified by a couple of different sources as well, the first half, or first game, depending on how you want to call it, finished 5-0 to Spurs, and the second half, or second game, was 2-2, from what I'm told. So if you want to take it as a whole, you can say it's 7-2. But yeah, I've seen some suggestions that maybe there was one goal from Cambridge in the second half, but I've been told by a couple of people that they think there were two in that second half as well. Not that it really matters. It's a friendly. The scoreline isn't really the biggest thing. The biggest thing is about kind of minutes in the tank. That's kind of be all and end all. But also, I guess, getting to grips with the Postecoglou football for some of these players. And also some of them playing in different positions, which is certainly going to be a thing. So about the new arrivals, Archie Gray, who I'm told very much catching the eye in training this week, as you would hope for a £40 million signing. But very much everyone was a bit wowed by what he's doing, which is great. That's kind of the point of it. And he is, look, I can already see the aggregators like going, oh, Gold says wowed in training, and then lots of angry people going underneath going, he's trying to tell you they don't need to sign anyone. I'm not. I'm just saying that Archie Gray is a very talented young man, and that's certainly what people have kind of made of him so far. I've actually saw a little video that someone had made, various players interviewed that played, or Leeds players, who were all saying that he was like the best player they've ever seen. Which was quite interesting. He is honestly rated so highly. So he played in the second half of the game today, and he played at right back, from what I'm told, which is interesting. It could also lend itself to the fact that Spurs don't have a lot of defensive cover right now in terms of players being away at the tournaments, in Dragic and Romero and Van de Ven. Obviously, Dragic and Van de Ven now out of the tournaments. But that meant people like, I guess, Emerson Royale probably playing in the centre of defence and things like that. But certainly, we know that's a job that Archie Gray can do. And he played, 52 games or so for Leeds last season, and a fair chunk of those were at right back. So, yeah, one to keep an eye on with Archie Gray. Everything I'm hearing from lots of people in the club is a view that he's going to get a lot of minutes next season, because he is obviously a very talented young midfielder. We've seen it not only for Leeds in the Championship, but we also saw it in the FA Cup against Chelsea when he bossed the midfield as a 17-year-old at that point, but also as a right back, where, I think he had the most tackles in the Championship last season. That he is, he's a kind of a big growing lad, and I've kind of been hearing a lot of good things about his temperament as well as demeanour and the way he acts around the club. I think he's been given a very good education at Leeds. I think the way that the young players there, and it's not to say that's not the same elsewhere, but at Leeds, they're kind of, you're expected to very much not get ahead of yourself and not get an ego or anything like that. And yeah, lots of good things I'm hearing about him, both on the pitch and also off of it as well. So yeah, he played as a right back, and from what I understand, Lucas Bergvall was playing in the centre of the pitch. Actually, I'm trying to remember. I'm not entirely sure. Let me see if I've got whether Bergvall played first half or second half. So much stuff I was trying to piece together. I might have it here. Let's have a little look. I didn't actually write it down. Let's have a look here. I may have it in one of these bits here. No, I haven't. I haven't actually. I'm not entirely sure. But either way, he played, and I think he was very creative from what I hear. I've seen some suggestions on Twitter that he got a lot of assists. He may well have been, but I haven't had that confirmed, so I'm not going to say that as a thing. He may well have done. I think with Bergvall, from what I understand and hearing from people, there's a lot of praise for his ability. Everyone has been quite wowed by wow. This guy can do amazing things with the football. He's got a very clever football brain, but also an understanding, I think, that with Archie Gray, the adaptation period is going to be a little bit easier because the Championship is a very physical, fast league. Premier League is another step up, but he's kind of almost had his induction in a way, and that it won't be as big a jump as I think it will be for Bergvall to have to get used to the tempo and the power, I think, of the Premier League, which is something that I've been hearing from people. That's kind of the thing for him, is about, going straight into these games very quickly, moving with the ball, doing what you've got to do with it and everything like that, which he can do and he'll be able to do. This is exactly what they told me when I went to speak to people at Djurgården and Brommapojkarna in Sweden, that very much that's what it's going to be about. He's got it all up there. He's got the ability. I don't know why I was to go over there. I was going to work my way up the head. He's got all the ability and intelligence to do these things. He's just going to have to get used to the sudden pace of it all. And to be fair to him, he's done a little mini interview I saw, and very much, I think, tempo and power, or speed and power, or something, were the two things that he mentioned as well. So yeah, I would imagine he might need that little bit more time, and maybe Archie Gray might be in a position to come in and start games, whereas with Lucas Bergvall, maybe there'll be a more gradual process of minutes here and there, and maybe starting him in Europe. I don't know. But yeah, keep an eye on Archie Gray. Honestly, they've both, like I say, both of them I've been hearing a lot of praise for. But people, definitely with Archie Gray, it feels like maybe slightly more ready-made. But that's reflected in the price. Lucas Bergvall's 8.5 million. Archie Gray, 40 million, technically, the package in total. I'm intrigued to see what happens with young Alfie Devine. Because obviously when Alfie Devine was here last summer, under Postecoglou was very impressed with him, really took a shine to him. But since he's been away at Port Vale and Plymouth, there's his players that have come in his position who maybe are more ready-made. Certainly in Archie Gray. And yeah, he's got a bit of a fight in his hands. I wonder if he'll just head out on loan again to kind of try to continue to develop while these players are going to be likely around the first team. Yeah, interesting to see what happens with him, certainly. So, that's the two new boys. From what I understand, that 5-0, Brennan Johnson scoring a hat-trick. Sonny, apparently, a few people have told me he was absolutely on fire. He just looked really, really sharp. He got a couple of goals. So, that's the 3 and the 2 for the 5. Well done, I can count. I'm not entirely sure who was playing where, whether Brennan Johnson was through the middle or Sonny was through the middle. But certainly that's where the goals seem to have come in the first half. Elsewhere, you had Pedro Porro. Don't forget I said that Archie Gray was second half. So Pedro Porro first half, you presume at right back. Basuma and Kulusevski also, I'm told, in the first half. Also Manor Solomon getting his first minutes of the year, wasn't it? Because those knee problems last year. He apparently played in the first half as well. Second half was more players, James Maddison, Werner, Oliver Skipp, Emerson was in that second half as well. And like I said, Archie Gray too. So you would imagine Emerson was probably playing at centre-back. I think Ashley Phillips the only natural centre-back right now. Although there's some suggestions that he did spend some of the match at right-back, but I haven't had that confirmed. So I'm not going to say that that's exactly what happened. But there was certainly some suggestions that maybe for a little portion of the game at least he was playing slightly out of position. Like I say, Romero, still at Copa America, got the final to play, and Van der Ven Dragishin, having finished their Euros involvement. I'm intrigued to see who comes back out of those the quickest. I would imagine Dragishin probably comes back for the tour, and I would imagine maybe Vicario comes back for the tour as well. I know, obviously, Italy and Romania got past the knockout group stages, but certainly Vicario didn't play any football. So maybe after a week or two, would be a week and it would be a week or two since he went out. Maybe comes on the tour. So when I was there was quite a few, because of the defensive issues and lack of cover. There was certainly lots of reshuffling and youngsters used, and also youngsters playing out of position. Jamie Donnelly, from what I understand, played as a left back, and from a fair few reports, did pretty well. Looked really good there. I'm not saying that's going to be his future. It doesn't seem to be at this stage. I think he'll go out on loan. But apparently he did a really good job. Again, I guess it's that mentality that, the inverted fullbacks in the Postecoglou system, that you've kind of got to feel like a midfielder as well. So with Jamie, he's a very adaptable young man, only 19 years old. He's played in so many different positions over the last few seasons that I'd imagine playing at left back is probably no kind of big jump for him. But apparently he did well. And they used this very highly rated young centre-back called Janai Byfield. He only turned 16 in March. Everyone in the academy has been raving about him. I've heard about him, but because most of the time he was still 15 and even 16. You don't want to big these players up too much, of course, because they're so young. But he has been a name that people have spoken about in the within the academy and stepping up, and despite only at that point being 15, playing for like the under 18s and things like that. And I don't think he's like a big tall lad at the moment. I think he's still growing in that respect, but I think he is quite well built, so he's got a kind of strength to him. And I think, but kind of the reason I'm mentioning him now is because he's playing for Postecoglou in this behind closed doors friendly for him as well. So a really good opportunity for him. And yeah, we'll see kind of how he develops. And like I say, so young, so young. Anything can happen to these players in this kind of the next period of time. And you've still got Luka Vuskovic to come in as well. You kind of forget about him. He's going to be coming through the door next summer too. You've got Alfie Dorrington, who's out injured at the moment. Probably not going to be back till maybe late August, September after his hamstring surgery. So yeah, so that was cool. I think other youngsters, Tyrese Hall, George Abbott, Luca Gunter. I think seems to be that Iago Santiago and Max Robson came on later in the game. And of course, maybe the young player that some people are wondering about, Mikey Moore. Mikey Moore scored, which is fantastic in the second half. He was playing in a slightly different role for him. He was playing off the right wing. Mikey can either play through the centre, but often you'll find him on the left cutting inside, whereas this time he was playing on the right and yeah, popped up with a goal, which is a big thing. I get the sense from speaking to people in the last couple of weeks, and especially this week with the work he's been doing with the first team, I think Mikey's going to get a fair bit of game time this season, which is great. I think in a weird way, kind of sending out some of the players on loan to get their own development, like Jamie Donnelly, like Will Lancashire, I think that cements Mikey Moore, who'll turn 17 in August. It's incredible how young he is. It kind of clears the path for him to be the go-to young academy player that I guess Postecoglou turns to in games. And, he's a very creative, clever, young attacking player. He will be able to deliver something from the bench when he needs it. And just, you just got to build up his game time, build up the experience of first team football. It's going to be heavily involved across this this pre-season, it seems. And if you're going to go ahead and score in games, that's only going to do you the world of good as well. Really excited what can happen for Mikey this season as well. So the seventh goal of the bunch, I'm not sure whether it came before or after Mikey's, but I've been told two different versions of this. One person thought it might have been an actual Timo Werner goal, and another person suggested he maybe forced an own goal from Cambridge. So, either way, I don't think we're going to see like a match report or anything from this game. I don't think Spurs kind of even acknowledging it exists. It's whether, I suppose, Cambridge put anything out, but I'd imagine they'll abide by whatever Tottenham want to do, probably. But yeah, so it seems to be it was the other one. And I think, from what I understand, that Cambridge got on the score sheet twice later on in the game. For those wondering, Jed Spence and Sergio Reguilon training with the group during the week, filling in various kind of roles where Postecoglou needed them to, but have been quite clearly told that they're not in Postecoglou's plans this season. To be fair, as he did last summer, as he did in January when both were kind of coming to the end of their first loan spells at Man United and Leeds respectively, he's been quite clear with them from the start, and from what I understand, they weren't involved in this match either. So, yeah. So that's, unless, no. From what I'm told, they weren't involved at all. And yeah, it's just a case of them finding moves now. With Jed, obviously Genoa would like him. Sergio Reguilon, yeah, it's a strange one. I would have thought there'd be a lot more interest in him than there has been thus far, because he had a good season on the whole, especially at Brentford. Alejo Velis and Dane Scarlett both got minutes up front, from what I understand. Not sure about Richarlison. From the reports I heard about him, and again, it's difficult because maybe people might have seen the game in different stages and things like that. But from what I understand, a couple of people kind of mentioned him being on the bench and watching or watching the game from the sidelines. He has kind of been doing rehab work recently. So maybe he's just not quite there yet to properly start his pre-season. This is always the thing about having a very early pre-season game like that, whether Richarlison is involved in the next couple of games or not, because they're coming up thick and fast now. You've got Hearts on Wednesday, which I'll be working my way up to, or making my way up to. QPR, Loftus Road on Saturday. Obviously, I'll be there as well. Don't quite obviously, but I will be. Japan and Korea very quickly after that. They only fly out a couple of days after the QPR game. I will be there as well. They can't shake me. I'm like a kind of a buzzing fly around them. Get gold out of the way. Obviously, the matches out there. Vissel Kobe, the K-League All-Stars and Bayern Munich. And then we returned for Game 2 against Bayern, which is the big, hopefully, Hurricane farewell game. Eric Dyer playing in both of them. Yeah, August the 10th, Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. So that's pretty much everything. I haven't heard. I was just checking in case I had anything more that's come in on that game. But I think you've kind of got the bulk of that. I got an idea of what the teams kind of look like. I'm sure there's I'm sure you would have had the likes probably of Ben Davies, Pat Matasar involved as well. The keepers probably would have been Brandon Austin, Alfie Whiteman. You would have thought. I'm not sure with Fraser Forster. I can't remember if I've seen any footage of him back yet or not. Obviously, we've seen him kind of coming into the building, but whether he's back in action or not, let me know. I'm trying to remember. I only watched a couple of. There's one training video. I've only watched that once, I think. So you may well have spotted him doing goalkeeper stuff. Who else would have been involved? Who's back? I mentioned Oliver Skip, didn't I? There'll be other players. So that's kind of it for the first team friendly. Anyway, the behind closed doors secret game that doesn't really exist. I'm wondering if anyone they tried to do like the Men in Black like mind swipe on anyone. It didn't work because we got some info out of it, which left the under-21s very kind of weakened under-21s because obviously they had a fair chunk of them playing in this first team friendly at the training ground. You also had Jude St-Bell's got an injury at the moment, so he's not playing yet. But they still managed to win. It was a very makeshift team, especially in defence. And against an Enfield Town side that mainly played their big guns in the second half. Enfield Town have last season won promotion to National League South. So, yeah, they're just 2 steps away, really, from... there's only, one league above them separates them from the Football League now. So, they've done fantastically. It's their first time at that level. Going to be a big season for them. But for Spurs, it's going to be... the under-21s, it's going to be a really interesting season. And this is going to be... I'm fascinated to see how people's... kind of how, not patient, but how understanding people are as this season goes on about the nature of under-21s development football, because last season was so spectacular, and obviously the under-21s won Premier League 2, they won the playoffs as well. They were just brilliant. They had so many big kind of contributing players in the team. Wayne Bennett, previous season, difficult one, so many injuries, such a young team. You've heard me say before about struggles in getting players available for training and things like that, because Conte would use them in first team training sessions as static opposition, which was great for their development. And they technically got relegated, but they were saved by the reformation and revamping of the league, which made it a bigger league. And they went and won it the next year under Wayne Bennett. Some people calling for him to go one year, and then next year he's won the whole thing. It just shows you under-21s football is about so much more than results. It's about the development of these young players. And a lot of the players that Wayne Bennett developed in the season where they struggled, gave them game time in different positions because there were so many injuries, like Jamie Donnelly. They were then ready for the next season. And now I feel like the little cycle is going to go round again, because next season... just for instance, you're going to lose Jamie Donnelly probably and Will Lancashire to loans. And if you only lose those 2 players to loans as the under-21s, you're losing about 60 or more, 65... No, about 60 is right. About 60 goal involvements from the team. Will Lancashire obviously got 32 goals last season. I've forgotten Jamie's numbers to hand, but when you counted everything in, it was about 10 goals and 20... assists, something along those lines. 2 phenomenal players at that level. If you lose them to loans, that under-21s team suddenly looks very bare. And I don't even know who would play as the central striker. Whether I think the likes of like Judson and Bell probably needs a loan. He is an older player there. He is in his 21 now. He needs a loan really. You've got the youngsters that have come in there like George Feeney, who's come in as a centre forward, but he is so young as well. He's only 16. You can't difficult to thrust him in as a kind of an under 21 striker. Although I'm sure he'll get a few minutes there over the course of the season. He was getting kind of first team football back home before he came across from Glentoran. So maybe, but that's a lot of creativity and goals to replace. So it may be that Spurs under 21 struggle this season. It may be that they have some really great moments in games, but they might have to rely quite heavily on players like George Abbott, who I do think is going to get first team involvement as well this season. A lot of people really impressed with the way he's developed in the last year. Captain under 21s when he's just 18. So there's going to be a lot of pressure, I think, on these almost young leaders within the squad that don't go off. But yeah, if they do struggle and they're in the middle of the Premier League 2 rather than top, if you do see anyone slating these young players or the coaching staff, please do point out, especially if Lancashire and Donnelly do go off on loan, how much they suddenly got plucked out and extracted from that team. Even little things like not having Alfie Dorrington there. And Niall John, I don't know what's going to happen with Niall John. Niall John kind of needs to go on really and probably either get a loan or head off really, because he's in his 20s now. I'm trying to think how old he is, 21, maybe 22, yeah. I watched him today and he's such a good kind of mature player at that age group, but he needs to be playing professional senior football. And he may head off. But yeah, so if you see anyone slating them, please do point out that they're not the same team as last year. And that's what happens in development football. You kind of have these little cycles of not generations, but age groups that come through together. You would have had Mikey Moore come through into this group probably, but he's been fast-tracked to the first team. So yeah, it's a fascinating whole kind of other world of football, the whole academy thing. Talking to Will Lancashire, brilliant news that yesterday he got a 5-year deal, which shows the club's faith in him. There's a real belief that he can become a very, very good striker as long as his development is handled right. He's very raw at the moment. There's aspects to his game that need to be worked on. He's been with the first team across this last week with them, but very much the idea was to let him play for the under-21s because mainly, I'm guessing, because it was a weaker kind of looking under-21s and to give them that goal threat. And his goals were good. One was close range, kind of poacher's goal. The other one was a smash past the keeper. And he's ready for that next level now. The idea is to send him out on loan. Lots of Championship and League One clubs looking at him. And I think the key with that is, I know some people say, he's ready for the Championship. Get him in there. We've seen with someone like, let's say, Dane Scarlett, that's not the best move for a young player is one where they're going to play regularly. It may be that it's League One rather than Championship, but a loan in League One playing every single game is better for you than playing 25% to half of the games in the Championship. It just is. It's a better development loan for you. We'll see what happens with him. But he's a good lad as well. I was watching. There was some young fans around the what do you call it? It's not a tunnel. Essentially, just the players' kind of entrance onto the pitch. It becomes a tunnel, but it's not when they're actually there. And just watching players like Will Lancashire and Josh Keeley as well, kind of making themselves available for these young fans that wanted selfies and photos and things like that. And other players were as well. I was kind of having a bit of the way the world has gone conversation with someone at the game, in that at academy level, they really appreciate how cool it is, I think, to have these young fans kind of calling for them, wanting photos and autographs, and knowing they have to do it. And the women's game is very much like that. There's this real connection. We were kind of saying that with the first team, and mostly this is just the Premier League now, they're kept so separate from the fans that, I'll go away on the pre-season tours and you'll see there's this big drive to do this and have selfies and all of this sort of stuff with the foreign fans. which is understandable. It's all part of bringing the game to them. They then got less chance of seeing these players in the flesh. But you also kind of think, like, oh, it'd be nice if there was more events for them to be able to kind of, I don't know, just be there for the young fans and things like that as well. There was one young lad as well who, I'm not going to say his name or anything like that right now. I might even do a piece on it at some point. There's this young boy who's become a little bit of a mascot for the under-21s. This lovely boy who was having some, I think, what's the best way to put it? He just needed a bit of self-confidence in his life. And the under-21s have taken him kind of under their wing, Wayne Burnett and the coaching staff. And every time they see him, he goes to games, he just is really happy being at matches. And whenever they see him at these games, they take him to be around the players. They take him onto the pitch. He's only young. And it was just lovely. And he turned up today and he was giving them all these little friendship bracelets. And it was very cool. It's very cool. The little things in football that I love to see, you kind of lose it at the top of the game. And it was very nice. Like I say, I want to do a little piece on him, but I don't want to kind of use names or anything like that because he is a very young kind of boy. It's one to kind of get the proper stuff on, but you can get the idea of it. It's very cool. The under-21s, they played pretty well. They did. Like I say, Lancashire netted once in each half. Callum Olasese scored the other goal from close range. That was the first goal of the game. Niall John's very nice through ball to him. I thought Damola Ajayi looked very good. He was mostly down the right, looked very dangerous, pinging in balls from the side and trying to beat his man. The defence did well, bearing in mind it was a real makeshift one. Josh Keeley did well in goal. He didn't have much to do in the first half, but second half he made a really good reflex save from very close range. Leo Black came off the bench, looked very effective as well. I thought it was a little bright cameo from him too. It's I'm looking forward to kind of getting to the under-21s games as well. I struggled at times last year because they just either didn't quite fit because they were first team games or there was other things I was having to kind of do around reporting. And I'm hoping maybe the European games this year kind of knock the schedule slightly one day here or there, and that allows me to get to more under-21s games because I do enjoy it. I love seeing the kind of young players develop and hopefully coming into the first team. And you have this little bit better connection with them. They know who you are as well. And as a reporter, it's going to make my life easier when I see them walking through the mix zone and they'll go, oh yeah, there's that weird bloke that used to kind of always report on me when I was a teenager kind of thing. It sounded weirder. It sounded less weird in my head than it did when I said it. But you know what I mean. Talking of young players, one has left, which is a sad one in a way, but I've kind of, as you've heard me saying over recent weeks, it was always going to happen, actually probably recent months. Troy Parrott has departed for RZ Alkmaar. Some people tell me you're not supposed to say RZ Alkmaar because the A in RZ technically is Alkmaar. So you're saying Alkmaar. But so many people use it. It's just kind of the way. I think it's become natural to say that. He's gone there in a £6.7 million deal. It's €8 million deal in total. English pounds sterling. That is 6.7 million. And from what I understand, there's a 20% sell-on clause that's been negotiated into there by Spurs. So he's signed a 5-year contract with them, Troy. I think it's a brilliant move for him. I think it's such a great next step for him. He went to the Eredivisie last season, scored 10 goals in the league season, another 7, including 2 hat-tricks in the playoffs, trying to keep Excelsior Rotterdam up. He couldn't, despite his very best efforts. They went down, and RZ have looked at him and said, well, if you're going to do that, I don't know if they've actually made the noise, but they may have done. If you can do that for a team that's struggling right down the bottom of the league, how many goals are you going to score for us? They finished, I think, 5th in the league. So, yeah, I think it's a really, really good move for him. He's been at Spurs for ages. He joined Spurs back in the summer of 2017 as a 15-year-old from Belvedere. So high hopes for him. And his technique, I still maintain, is one of the best. I think I've said previously, coaching staff when he was young used to say he was the best finisher at the club. He would put the ball in the corners every time. And that's better than Harry Kane, who was there, which is going some as praise goes. But it just, again, we spoke about earlier about the importance of loan moves. Troy went to Millwall, Ipswich, MK Dons, Preston, and then to Excelsior. And maybe it was the Millwall and Ipswich ones just didn't work for him in that first season. MK Dons' first half wasn't as great. He had a little bit of a eureka moment when he realised what he had to do. Second half, he was very good and really helped them, I think, get into the playoffs that season. Preston, varying degrees of success. Wouldn't have scored as many goals as he wanted, but it was a kind of a good development loan. But with Excelsior, bang, he just found a very technical league that suited his game very well. And you forget, he's only 22 years old. He's made 23 appearances for Ireland, scored 5 goals for his country as well. So I think having negotiated the 20% sell-on clause, that kind of shows that Spurs believe he could go on to flourish in the Netherlands and develop. And I guess for their point of view, it means that either they're going to get a chunk of any future sale for him, or if he really is terrific, buy him back. This is that people go, oh, is there a buyback clause? Technically, a sell-on clause kind of becomes a buyback clause because you're getting 20% off the player. Suddenly they become a much cheaper option for you. So yeah, and the fact that he's club trained means that if he were to go to the Netherlands and absolutely shine, because I think I mentioned this week, it might have been on the podcast with Guesty, that if he goes and scores, I think he's going to hit 20 goals in the Eredivisie this season. I think if you can score 17, let's say 10, let's not include the playoff ones because you could say he's playing against lower opposition. But for me, if you can score 10 for a team that is relegated, for a team that is looking to try and get up there and maybe win the title, I think you double it. I think he'll get 20. And immediately, Troy Parrott, if he scores 15, 20 goals in the Eredivisie, suddenly he's a £20 million player, I think. It's crazy the way kind of football works. It's probably just as impressive as what he did at Excelsior, but it's seen in a different way. It's just weird. I thought that he's clearly obviously not part of Postecoglou's plans, and he wasn't. And it comes in the same week he signs a 5-year deal leaving the club as Will Lancashire signs a 5-year deal to commit to the club. And now all eyes, I guess, are on him and his development and the loan moves he takes and make sure that he gets the right ones. Because I know some people would probably prefer Will to be part of the first team squad and get minutes here and there. Personally, I think you allow him to go out there, play games, try and score. I think that's the key. I think this was always Troy's issue, was that he wasn't scoring the goals in his early loans that he was getting at under 21s, under 19s in the UEFA Youth League and under 18 level. For Will, to have scored 32 goals last season, he needs to go somewhere and kind of show that he can score at any level, and it's a big thing for young players like Harry Kane. He's the classic example. Didn't set the world alight in goal scoring, but I guess he just learned other bits and pieces from that loans, and just obviously it worked, didn't it, for him at Tottenham and at Bayern and for England. Troy put a little goodbye message up. He said, after an amazing 7 years full of memories and experiences, it's time for me to take the next step in my career. I wanted to come on here on social media, that is, to express my gratitude to the incredible players and staff members I've worked with. I've made friends for life. Finally, a massive thank you to the fans that have and continue to support me through my journey. Spurs will always be in my heart. I remember on the pre-season tour in 2019, which would have been Singapore and Shanghai, how exciting it was. He was starting to get minutes and playing with the likes of Sonny and Lamela in games. I know that's random that I've said Sonny and Lamela, but they're the ones that come to mind, him playing with them in the game in Singapore, I think it was. I think he almost scored. Or he maybe set up Sonny to score. I can't remember, and that was the season we started to see little bits and pieces of him. He played in the Carabao Cup game at Colchester, wasn't it? And then obviously Poch left, Jose came in, gave him his Premier League debut, and then absolutely slated him after the FA Cup defeat to Norwich after he lost a penalty, missed a penalty, had a penalty saved, which was just of no real use to him or whatsoever. But there you go. What else we got? I understand Spurs rejected a formal offer from AC Milan for Emerson Royal in recent days, which I understand was pretty much the same as the verbal offer they'd previously made that Spurs rejected. It's kind of like, Would you take this? No. Would you take this if I put it in writing? No, it doesn't change. We don't want it. The Spurs are looking for at least, but if not more than 20 million euros for the right back for Emerson. Dortmund are also keen on him. I think there's suggestions that they may make an approach. Saudi Pro League sides also have been showing some interest over the last probably year or so. I know some people aren't the biggest Emerson fans, and there's been some suggestions of why don't you just take it? Just take any money they offer. I don't think you need to with Emerson, unless spectacularly everyone runs away from him suddenly. There's multiple interest in him, not just from one club, and he is a solid right back who I think for a lot of clubs, he was a Brazilian international until recently. He only played. I think he might have even played this year. It was either this year or late last year. He last played for Brazil. I think he'll be a very decent player for many teams. So I don't think his value would have dropped pretty much from Spurs signing him from Barcelona. He just obviously didn't play too much last season. So yeah, keep an eye on that one. I'd imagine that someone's going to have to offer a little bit more to get him through the door. Obviously, he's spoken publicly. I didn't actually write down the quotes, but he has. There was an interview with a Brazilian media outlet. I don't know if it was recent or whether it's one that they're just releasing now, but he was essentially saying that he's told Postecoglou that he needs to play more, and that essentially said that club can they let him go if they're not, he's not going to get the game time that he needs at Spurs, then can he please go and get it elsewhere? And he also spoke about the Milan interest and being very flattered that they're a big club and it was a dream to play for Barcelona. Now he's played for Spurs and Milan would be a very big club for him as well. So yeah, keep an eye on what happens with him. Other little bits of news to mop up. Dele Alli. Everton have reached an agreement with Spurs so they don't have to pay an immediate fee for Dele Alli if they offer him a new contract, which apparently was part of the original deal. Under the terms of his transfer in January 2022, Spurs were due a fee if Dele agreed a new deal at Everton. So from what I understand, the stories that have gone out on that today have very much almost made it sound like Spurs have just gone, okay, you can have him. I don't think that's entirely the case. From what I understand, I think there would be additional payments based on certain objectives being met, plus a sell-on clause as well, from what I understand. So, which makes sense because the reports are suggesting Spurs and Everton came to an agreement. An agreement isn't much, you have him. It will be that, okay, no, go for it. We're not going to take money for now if you give him a new contract. But further down the line, if he proves to be decent, which everyone desperately hopes he gets back to a good level again. That'd be wonderful. But if he does, then Spurs are kind of honoured for their original agreement with Everton, which I think is fair. I do think it is. Obviously, Dele's had a tough time of it, which obviously is very much out there in the public. But yeah, it's key now for him just to get back to just focus on the football. It'd be brilliant for him. I'd love to see him back at the top of the game as well. And of course, now it would seem that Tottenham will benefit as well. What else we've got to mop up? Rodrigo Bentancur. The chaotic scenes after the Copa America semi-final between Uruguay and Colombia. Let's start with the match. The match itself, Uruguay lost 1-0. Bit of a fiery semi-final in Charlotte in America, which I'm heading to actually later this year because I've got a family member who lives out there. Bentancur was forced off in the first half of the game with an injury. Very unfortunate. He's going in for a tackle. Him and Matthias Oliveira both kind of slide tackle into each other while trying to get the ball. Didn't look good. I think he carried on for another 10 minutes or so and then had to come off. Jefferson Lerma then scored not too long after he went off what would end up being the winning goal. Bentancur later on, after what happened next, was ushered away really heavily limping. However, just before I came on this, I saw that reports that's interesting. Just some little bits about potential left backs at Spurs. Yeah, interesting. We'll see. I think that's one for a future one. This one isn't probably one to get deep into transfer stuff because I think there's some stuff that's starting to bubble up, but it's not at the stage at the moment yet where it's kind of like, let's dive into that because it could just all dissipate and it ends up not being anything. But yeah, Uruguayan media very much have been suggesting that he's been working really hard over the last 48 hours or so with the medical staff to be potentially in a position to play against Canada in a third place match, which third place match is the most pointless things ever. But maybe a good sign, I suppose, for Spurs if he's in potentially a position where he could end up playing. Maybe not as bad then or any issue as major as the previous ones he's had Bentancur as well. Right, but we need to talk about what happened after the game, which kind of overshadowed everything else. So I should stress for context, there's been claims from the Uruguayan players that their families were being caught in the middle of trouble in the stands. What that trouble was is there's been varying versions of this. There's been some suggestions that it was clashing between Uruguay and Colombia fans. There was some suggestions that fans were throwing stuff at the Uruguay players. There's different elements, but the overriding thing seems to be that families were in or around or near that area. So some of the Uruguay squad jumped into the crowd. You've seen the images of Liverpool's Darwin Núñez jumping into the crowd and just absolute chaos continuing. So Bentancur. Footage appears to show down on the pitch, Bentancur, I'm going to say this is clearly and kind of, sorry if this is very much evident, like this is what happened, but this is the way it kind of needs to be said. So footage appears to show Bentancur hurling a bottle from the touchline into the crowd, which then seems to fly very close to a female Uruguayan fan, and then it strikes the forehead of the Uruguay fitness coach, Santiago Ferro, who had climbed up into the stands as well to help out, whatever. Another angle appears to show a bottle smashing against Ferro's head, cutting it open, quite a deep cut with blood smeared across his forehead. He's really dazed. That female fan goes to help him, and he's kind of taken away from medical attention. And then the next day, Ferro was photographed at the Uruguay training camp with a big scar across his right temple. I don't know why I had to tell you what the right temple was. A second video appears to show Bentancur throwing another object, which looked like a black bottle rather than the one he had originally, throwing that object into the crowd before he's ushered away from by staff members. So the bottle that hits Ferro very much kind of seems to like explode on impact. There's suggestions. Some people tried to claim that it was a glass bottle. I don't think it was. My initial thinking is maybe it looked more like it was a water bottle. And there's a suggestion again that the thing that's exploding out off of his forehead is ice. Again, though, some people have kind of written off as it was only a water bottle. It was hard enough to leave a deep cut on the man's forehead and leave him dazed and needing medical attention. Right, so that's that bit. This is another bit, it's very much documenting the evidence part of it as well, because you've got to be very careful of the way you say things as well when you talk about stuff like this. So, CONMEBOL, which is the like the version of UEFA for that part of the world, South America, all of that, and more actually, have sent documents to the Uruguay Football Association with the names of 11 players they're investigating with video evidence. The Uruguayan journalist Rodrigo Romano reported on Friday around 8 p.m. the Uruguay Football Association received the documents that have 11 names of players who participated in the final episodes for CONMEBOL. The documents contain the names, number in the competition, and cause attributed to them for the purposes of dealing with the sanctions to be determined. Then it lists the 11 players, of which one of those is Rodrigo Bentancur. And it says each of the players' names is accompanied by film evidence and the reason for which a disciplinary file has been opened. The AUF, which is Uruguayan Football Association, will have until next Wednesday, July the 17th, to present their defence in writing. After that day, a period will begin for CONMEBOL to study and resolve whether or not to sanction each of the aforementioned players. There are no preventative sanctions, so these players are fit to play on Saturday against Canada tonight. The corresponding penalties must be served in the 2026 qualifier matches, starting next September when, during the resumption, Uruguay will host Paraguay and then visit Venezuela. There may also be a financial fine if deemed appropriate. Right. So my thoughts very quickly on this, because I went over it at length with Guesty on the podcast, and anyone that's heard that doesn't want to hear me kind of going off about it again. Just very briefly, I absolutely accept that it sounds like a complete mess in the stands, sounds like security wasn't great up there, and I absolutely understand the fears over family safety, and I can kind of understand the need to get in there and sort it out, as some of the players you could see doing that, and I also accept that Bentancur, being injured, wasn't probably in the position of getting up there in what looked like a bit of a climb up there to get it. However, while I can understand people saying they were protecting their families, absolutely, I would struggle to believe that I wouldn't be kind of jumping up there to try and go in and get them and pull them out of that situation if others weren't. What I can't understand, though, is throwing not one, but it appears to be 2 bottles into that area where the families apparently were. I can't see that that's a help to anybody. If anything, it actually increases the danger. And look, I do accept as well that some people's brains can switch off in the panic of seeing such a thing, and if his family were involved in that. But I just kind of feel like lobbing a projectile towards that area isn't going to benefit anyone, and clearly has had a very negative effect in leaving a very deep and unpleasant cut on one of his own fitness coach's heads. In fact, I think Bentancur was very, very lucky, because had that gone, a couple of millimetres lower, that's the guy's eye. And who knows what even happens in that scenario, potentially blinded. And maybe even from the aesthetic point of view, if it hits a fan, the female Uruguay fan that I said, if it hits her, creates something similar, then the aesthetic of that, look, as awful as it is to see a man, a coach of one of his teams, covered in blood down his forehead from the action that appears to suggest it came from Bentancur's throwing. Yeah, I don't know, maybe people kind of fob that off slightly with like, what a rubbish throw, he's hit one of his own. Whereas maybe if it hits a fan, it becomes something else. And yeah, it's just, it could have been so much worse, which is... Yeah, so look, I appreciate people are trying to protect their families. I just don't see how that is protecting anyone. If anything, it's causing more danger. But I do take on board some people have said you just don't know how you're going to react in that situation. But I still think he reacted in the wrong way. And we had a good debate, and I guessed on the podcast about this as well. CONMEBOL, they're going to have to take into context the context. Essentially, they have to look at the context of what happened, but also I do think there needs to be a deterrent to stop players doing that. They don't want players thinking, well, I can solve problems in the stand by lobbing stuff at them. It's not going to be the way they want that to be solved, or even, I guess, players going up there. Of course, security should have been better. I was looking at, Eric Dyer went up into the crowd, didn't he? 4-game ban for him from the FA. Richarlison, for throwing a flare back into the stands, got a 1-game ban. So, yeah, it's there. The precedents are there in the FA kind of side of things. Although, I would say the Richarlison and Bentancur is slightly different. Obviously, it was one thing thrown back. You could argue a flare maybe is even more dangerous, perhaps. I don't know. Or you could say that Bentancur's... This is my other thing with it, is like doing it twice, if that's what happened, suggests kind of a little bit more time to think about it and still doing that. I wonder if that might reflect badly on him when they're looking at the video evidence, perhaps. Or they may just see it as one thing. Yeah, so, we've still got the FA investigating Bentancur's comments. I put a check in with them this week. They're still in the process of investigating Bentancur's comments about Son. So potentially there could be a scenario where he could end up being banned for club and country. Or it could end up that he doesn't get a ban at all for either. But we'll have to see what's decided. So, yeah, very much a mixed week of interesting, different things, and yeah, by all means, give me your comments underneath on all of them, all of them. I don't know whether I'd reached the point before the last video. I can't remember or not, but I feel like I didn't because I didn't want to say it in case I didn't get there. But just very quickly, a thank you. 60,000 subscribers now, which is so cool. It almost feels the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. That's awesome. And bearing in mind, I'm not someone that goes, click on this, like that, subscribe for that, whatever people say, which maybe has stopped me getting there quicker. I don't know. I'm not fussed about all of that stuff, but it is very much appreciated when I see that I've reached that. And I also had a little look at the views. I think it's almost 13.3 million views or something like that. Might be 13.2 million views, but that's just mad. I just sit here on this sofa, chatting away about Spurs. It's incredible that people, and when I put it on social media the other day, I had people telling me that they watched from the start, which is mad. When I used to do, like, before it was YouTube, when I used to walk around the stadium while it was being built, doing, like, talking about the construction and stuff, and it's so kind of you. It really is. It's very cool. I never failed to appreciate it. And it's lovely. Like I said today at Enfield Town, just to see people coming up, and I just feel very fortunate and very undeserving, because Guesty takes the mickey out of me at times when people kind of come up for anything like that, and because it's true, journalists shouldn't get all of that. It's madness, but I guess for some people it's just I've become this weird presence in their life. So I'm sorry to them and to any significant others that maybe end up getting this face on their screen at times, and they lose their partner to this for an hour or so. But yeah, so there you go. Yeah, so that's it. Obviously, a big match with England tomorrow, which will be going to be dominating the headlines for a little while as well. But hopefully, like I said, I feel like there's some little bits and pieces that might be bubbling up with Spurs, but there's no point diving into them yet till they start to really get somewhere. And also, like I said, with Archie Gray, I do wonder on the right back scenario whether that essentially he now becomes the backup to Porro. It would seem to make sense. In which case you then could focus on the left back area. You could potentially then bring in a natural centre back rather than looking for one that can also play as a left back. You could bring in just a normal left back, but we'll see. That's for the next video, I think. Time to head off. Enjoy my Saturday evening, and I hope you all do the same. And yeah, as always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves. I shall catch you later. Goodbye.